All right. Well, how y'all doing this morning? It is so good to see all of you in here this morning. I hope you're doing good. I hope you find little treats on the seats in front of you. If you didn't get a treat, then there's a few scattered around. And if you like treats, there's just a few scattered around. So, we're just going to put that out there. But we're so glad you guys are joining us this morning. We are in the middle of our series called the 706, where we're looking at how we can love other people around us. Last week, we talked about families, how to better love our families. And with tomorrow being Valentine's Day, which I'm sure all of you husbands have already taken your wives out to a very elaborate dinner for Valentine's Day, because no one goes out on Monday, because that's just a weird day to go out, right? So you've already done that. But I thought we'd spend a little bit of time today focusing a little bit more on this relationship with our spouses, kind of a husband and wife type situation there. Now, some of you learn this from me, like, great, we're going to talk about marriage today. I'm not married. This isn't going to apply to me. Well, hold on. It applies to you. Because anytime you talk about love in a relationship, it applies to you because you can glean things from any relationship that there's love in there. So don't tune out on me today. I think that'll apply to you. Because I think, especially for you younger ones who aren't married, and it's a good thing you're not married because you're too young, but every choice that you make in life has a future impact on your marriage. No pressure. But every choice that you make in your life will have an impact on your marriage. And it kind of reminds me, this concept of pressure in those relationships, because you want to marry somebody, right, in your life who hasn't gone off the deep end probably, right? And so, like, if you make bad choices, get thrown in jail and all this type of stuff, that's a real fun conversation your first date. So, tell me about your past. Well, I was in prison for about 7 years for, she may not last very long at that date. She might excuse herself for the restroom and never come back. So you will make sure you're making good choices in life. But speaking of first dates, I want to share with you a little bit about my first date with Angie. Because, we talk about spouse relationships, and it's important to do that. And, we'd been hanging out for a few weeks, getting to know each other at college, and I decided that it was time for one of those DTR moments. Y'all know what DTR moments are, right? Define the relationship moments, right? It's time that you define the relationship. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to need to ask her out, like, on an official date. I mean, the school cafeteria was great and all, and hanging out after class was good, and we were getting to know each other, but there just was something about that wasn't very romantic, or, and people begin to ask, like, if you're hanging out with someone for a long time, like, are you guys going out? And you're like, I don't know, so you got to have that DTR moment. So I decided, hey, what better way to do that than to officially ask her out on a date? And so I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And the crazy thing is she agreed to go out with me on that date. So I asked her, I said, hey, let's go to dinner and a movie, and then maybe we'll catch some dessert afterwards. So it sounded like a good start. And I can remember I was a senior in college at the time, and I was like, hey, I'm going to get my best pair of jeans, my nicest button-up shirt I have. I actually combed my hair, try to make myself look real nice. And, I was like, I'm going to be as spiffy as I can possibly be. And I can remember how excited I was for our date as I began to walk to her dorm and began to run those plans through my head one more time. First, I was going to take her to this really nice Italian restaurant in Greenwood, South Carolina called Capri's. I think I'm going to take her to Capri's to go eat, and then we're going to go to a movie, and then I'm going to take her out to dessert afterwards, and we're just going to have a really nice time. And so my heart kind of skipped a beat, as I was knocking on her door, getting ready to pick her up. Now, what I didn't realize on the other side of that door was not excitement, but nervousness, okay? Because in college, everything I wore typically on day-to-day had holes in it. I would wear like 2 shirts because there was a hole over here in one shirt and then a hole over here in this one. But if I put them both on, you couldn't see through all the holes. All my jeans, shorts, everything had holes in them. And so the only way she knew me was either in soccer gear or in holy clothes. On top of that, I always wore my favorite Michigan hat backwards. And if you're a hat-loving guy, you'll appreciate this part of the story. So that hat in particular was no longer maize and blue. It was more kind of like a, pale pastel yellow and like baby blue type thing. There's a salt ring around it from when I would sweat it, It was held together in the front by electrical tape because, all the little clippies had broken off of it. But it was one of those hats that you could come on, and it just jump on your head and it fit perfect. I knew I needed a haircut when it started getting a little tight on my head because that hat knew my head better than I did. I was like, oh, time to get a haircut because my hat's getting a little tight on me, right? And I always wore that everywhere I went. So she's thinking, great. Because here's the thing, I'm going to take her to Greenwood, South Carolina. That's her hometown. So I'm about to take her to her hometown looking like what I normally look like, right? My hat on backwards and all these other clothes. So she was a bit on the nervous side. And but the good news is I showed up, she opened the door, and I was dressed nicely, and she had a somewhat sigh of relief. But there was still another fear that she had, okay? We were going to her hometown. And I had long since gotten rid of my first car, the Chevette, okay? I had upgraded. I bought my parents' old van. It was a 1979 full-size, two-tone green Ford van with tinted windows. Kind of like the Mystery Machine. She said it looked like a kidnapping machine. I don't know. But either way, that's what I drove. I bought it. It was cool because I lived in Florida. I was going to school in South Carolina. Everything I owned fit in the back of that van, including 2 couches, everything I needed, I fit in the back of that van. I'd drive to school, have my dorm room steps. So she was like, he's going to take me into my hometown driving that. So she was super relieved. And I was like, hey, can we take your car tonight? She was like, yes. Yes, you can take my car. So didn't hesitate, didn't skip a beat. So we took her car, and so she was super happy. We got to dinner. Dinner went great. I did realize that she had been there like a dozen times. Like it was like not really special for her to go to that restaurant, but I thought it was cool. Then we went to a movie, and yes, I remember the name of the movie. It was The Peacemaker with George Clooney in it. That was the movie we went to, because some of you are going to ask me after church, what movie did you go to? Do you remember? Yes, I remember, okay? And then we went afterwards. I was like, look, she's a very special girl, so I need to do the best for her. So I'm going to take her to get the country's best yogurt. And I took her to TCBY afterwards. And some of you older people know what TCBY is. They're still around, believe it or not. There's actually one in Peachtree City. They're kind of went bankrupt. They have a resurgence. But I took her to TCBY, and we talked for like 2 hours. And that's really where the date happened. If any of you have ever been on a date before, you go to dinner or movie, there's not much going on there. But afterwards, we talked for about 2 hours, and we really got to know each other there. And that's where we officially became boyfriend and girlfriend as we were at TCBY. So that's kind of where all that happened. But, something about those dates, when you think about the first dates and stories of those, I really enjoy hearing them. I really enjoy hearing how people met, how extreme circumstances and different things. And it's interesting because years ago, people were like, we met online. It was like an embarrassing thing to do. And now like everybody's like, we met online, And so it's funny to hear how relationships get started. I love hearing stories of connection and all that type of stuff. And because I think when we look at each other, we're kind of like, hey, we're all kind of different. But when we start sharing stories like about our first dates and the nerves that we had, the excitement and the anxiousness all in one, for some of you, total dread that guy asked you out, you have those moments where you're like, hey, that puts us on common ground. Because all of us go through those emotions. All of us have felt those butterflies. All of us have felt that excitement, some nervousness, You wonder, like constantly, guys, like, did I spill anything on myself, And you're constantly thinking, hey, how's this going? And that puts us all on this like level playing field, that we all begin to understand each other. And that whirlwind of emotions that we feel that started a relationship and oftentimes lasts to this day. Now listen, it doesn't mean that everything was smooth in your relationship. I get it, right? Because to be honest with you, when you start a relationship, they're fun and exciting. And then the longer you're in them, it's great. And for most couples, while they're dating, everything's pretty good. You might have a fight or two, but then you get married and everything changes, right? Everything changes. And you feel this roller coaster of emotions, and you go through these times. And relationships aren't always smooth. They're actually hard. And I think marriage is no exception to that. But I want to let you know today that marriage is a very big deal to God. It's like super important to him. There's so many passages in the Bible written about marriage, both in the Old and the New Testament. It's not just something that, oh yeah, by the way, Jesus mentioned this later in his life. No, this is something that's covered through the entirety of Scripture. You see, marriage was created by God. And because marriage was created by God, then we have to follow God's rules for marriage. We can't make up our own rules. We can't say, hey, let's do something different. It was made by God. And how we apply and how we relate to one another as spouses is all dependent upon what God says a marriage should look like. Now, we live in a culture that tries to redefine marriage on a continual basis. You see, in our culture, instead of us repenting of our sins and asking God for forgiveness and to show us the way, we want to turn marriage to be something that allows and is inclusive of our sin. Let's just say it's okay if you live a lifestyle this way. It's okay if you sin this way or that way. It doesn't matter. Just get married. And if it doesn't work out, then you can just end it. You see, it's taking something that was holy and important and made it a disposable contract. Made it like, hey, this is something you can do, but you don't have to do it. Whereas in God intended marriage, he intended to be a covenant. And a covenant is agreement between two or more people. And in a marriage, it's not just about you and your spouse. It's about you and your spouse and God. There's 3 of you in that union. He takes marriage very, very seriously. You see, when Christians think about the perfect marriage, we should never take our cues from society. We should never take our cues from, especially like romantic comedies. But there is a cue that we can take from one of them. We should be able to look at our spouse and say, "You complete me." And it's not the way you think it is, because there's something about that very first marriage where that statement, "You complete me," made perfect sense. John Calvin puts it this way: something was taken from Adam in order that he might embrace with greater benevolence a part of himself. He now saw himself, who had before been only half complete, rendered whole in his wife. The completeness of husband and wife is why the Apostle Paul says that to love your spouse is to love yourself. This connection of, hey, when I love my spouse, I'm actually loving myself. Because the two are really one. And there's so much more than just a sentiment of, oh, yeah, we share the same last name now. No, you're actually one flesh. Ephesians 5:28-32 puts it this way: in the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. So what exactly does it mean then to live as one? There are some implications for a husband and wife being one flesh. And the first one is that we're one body, okay? That we're one body. To understand this concept, we have to see the oneness that God brought about when he created marriage. So God created Adam first, right? And he walked with him in the garden. God walked side by side with Adam. He talked with him like you and I see each other and talk to each other. That's God and Adam rolling in the garden, okay? But God realized, hey, it's not good that Adam should be alone. So here's what God did. Genesis 2:18. The Lord said, it's not good he should be alone. I will make a helper fit for him. So God created a suitable helper for Adam. And he did so from Adam's own body. Genesis 2:21 says, so the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and while he slept, took one of his ribs and closed it up in place with flesh. And to the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. Now, the Bible doesn't go into a lot of detail about what happens when Adam woke up. So we're going to have to take some liberal license here to try and think about this. Adam was put into a deep sleep, and he woke up, right? Now he's missing a rib. And I wonder if he's 1, 2, 3, counting himself. I wonder if he felt pain, was a surgical opening and stuff like that, or did God just kind of reach in and pull it out, But, you would notice you're missing a rib, right? That would probably hurt a little bit, or, you I'm getting up off something's different over here, I'm missing something. So I'm not sure exactly how it went. But anyway, the dude woke up and he's like, hey, something's not right. I'm missing something. And as he's sitting there trying to figure out what's going on, all of a sudden, God starts walking up with Eve. And Adam looks up, and he's probably like, whoa, man. And that's why we call the women, because, no, not actually. But he looks up and he sees her there, and he has this moment, and he's like, what is happening? And the Bible says that when Adam sees Eve, this is what he says. Genesis 2:23. Then the man said, this at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. You see, the first marriage is a picture of two people becoming one flesh. It's this completeness. They literally shared everything, They literally were like, hey, here you go. Here's my rib, Y'all probably have heard that old joke. God was laying out the plans to Adam of, I'm going to create women, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and she's going to be this and this and that. And Adam's like, well, how much is that going to cost? And God goes, an arm and a leg. And Adam was like, what can I get for a rib? So, no. But this is, what's really happening here is this concept of that we're completing each other, and that the two become one flesh, and we begin to share life together and understand more of God and who he is. The second implication of this oneness is that we have one mission. Marital oneness creates a singularity in our purpose. When God created men and women, he gave them a calling. In Genesis 1:28, we see this calling. It says, And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth." You see, God knew that Adam couldn't do all this on his own. It was going to take a helper. It's going to take a team effort. Two people working together and sharing a load. Where one is weak, the other can be strong, complementing each other in so many ways. Now, fortunately today, it is no longer our singular responsibility to repopulate the earth. And that's a good thing. Although some of the families here at Southcrest have tried, because we apparently like having kids, and a lot of you having a lot of kids. And so I'm one of them, But we're no longer responsible for populating the earth, but we are responsible for bringing it into God's authority. And our mission in marriages is to show people the love of Jesus by how we love each other. Our purpose in a marriage is to show people the love of Jesus and how we love each other. Whether that's with our spouse, whether that's in how we treat our children, other family members, friends, or just people in our neighborhood. They should see Jesus in all of our relationships. That's our mission, is to let other people know who he is. Another implication we get from marriage being one flesh is that we're one union. You see, biblical oneness requires us to be in union together. And if we join in union to each other, that means we must leave other unions, notably our parents. Genesis 2:24, remember, said, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Listen, our love for our parents and us seeking their advice and wisdom certainly continues after we marry. This verse does not mean we disassociate with our parents completely. But the biblical teaching of the oneness of marriage is clear that the parents' authority ends when the man and woman marry. You see, influence and authority are two very different things. If we're under our parents' authority, by duty, we obey them. When I'm growing up and my parents tell me, "You do this and you do that," I'm like, "Yes, sir, yes, ma'am." Actually, I didn't usually say that. Half the time I said, "Nope, I don't want to." But anyway, when we're told to do something, we have that authority piece that we're supposed to. But once we're married and once we become a union with our wife, taking advice from our parents is completely different. Our parents would say, "Hey, if I was in your situation, I would do this." And then it's up to us to decide, what are we going to do? Are we going to take that advice? Are we going to do something else? What is it that we're going to do? There's this big difference in those two ideas. Now listen, spouses should continue to honor and respect their own parents and their in-laws, but they also must separate them in appropriate ways. You see, the extended family should not put itself between the husband and the wife, nor try to play them off against each other. And guys, this happens way more than we realize it in our society today. There's got to be boundaries. There's got to be clear, defined relationship standards there. Now, this advice is often easier said than done, especially when you come around the holidays, right? Because the holidays is when everybody has their traditions. I mean, you grew up with your traditions and you love them. Your spouse grew up with her traditions and she loved them. And now you're married and trying to figure out, hey, we should create our traditions. And that should be something that looks completely different. I totally get it. You either like dressing or you like stuffing, right? I mean, that's the ultimate argument here. You like dressing or you like stuffing, you got to pick one. And stuffing's the right way to go. I'm just throwing that out there, just, random thoughts. Or maybe you should just do something completely different, right? Just do mashed potatoes. Just make it easy, right? I mean, but figure something out that's yours together in a relationship that's no longer splitting sides. You see, the husband and wife in their own household must decide what that family is going to look like, what our goals are, what it means to be inclusive to our family, what our boundaries are, what we do, who we are. And that's part of this union idea. The final implication we see from being one flesh is that we have one love. We saw earlier in Ephesians, Paul telling us in Ephesians 5:28, in the same way, husbands should love their wives with their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. Now, we love our spouse. We are actually loving ourselves. You've probably heard the old adage back in the day, if you want to have a friend, you have to be a friend. Many of you have heard that. Many of you probably told your kids that. We're like, no one likes me. Well, are you doing things to be liked? The same is true with marriage. If you want your spouse to be loving and kind and thoughtful, then you must be a loving, kind, and thoughtful spouse to them. You see, you will get out of marriage what you put into marriage. And guys, that's true with any relationship. You will get out of that relationship what you put into that relationship. I think many of us understand that biblical principle is that we reap what we sow. And so it's our job to make sure that we are reaping because we have sown so much goodness into our spouse, that we've done so much for them. I think we would say that when we look at it, marriage from a biblical perspective, all of us think that's what we want in our relationships. So if that's what we want, that's what God intended, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to have a relationship where things go right and things go like you think they should go? And the answer is pretty simple. It's, first of all, it's sin. Sin is the problem in our marriages. The only candidate for you to marry in your life is a sinner. And their only option is to marry you, which AKA is also a sinner. And despite what some of you in this room may think, no one in here is perfect. No one in here is perfect. But here's the thing. Sin just doesn't stop there in the fact that, hey, here's two people who are sinners and connected. We have an added disadvantage of everybody who surrounds us in our life is also a sinner. Your parents, sinners. Your kids, big sinners, right? I mean, those kids, whoa, yeah, I got you. Yeah, awful, right? It's awful. And then you get into like your friends, your coworkers, your boss. I mean, they're all sinners, right? And all of this is influencing our lives and affecting our lives. And we're under this constant attack from our enemy, the devil, who on top of surrounding us with sinners, now is tempting us and throwing things at us that are hard for us to resist. You see, there can be this misconception when it comes to marriage that true love conquers all, and that once we become in love and once we get married, our lives will be peaceful. Guys, that is so false. Any of you who are married know this, that marriage is actually a magnifying glass to our sin. Think about it. When you barely know someone and you just get to know them, they don't know that much about you. And you usually put out your best foot forward, right? Hey, this is who I am. This is how I do. And they're like, oh, you're great. And then you start dating, you start noticing things. But then you get married and you're living together and like everything hits the fan at that point. Like you begin to see things and notice things that you didn't even know you would notice or see or care about. But now you care about them. And sin's just this huge magnifying, marriage is a magnifying glass to that sin. And it just points itself out. And it's something that's constantly in there. But the key to marriage is to work through and overcome each of these sins and obstacles, because two make a stronger union. And where you're weak, your spouse comes in and helps lift you up. But there are certain specific and predictable challenges to living as one. All good marriage counselors you talk to will bring up marriage, money. They'll bring up your work environments. They'll bring up extended family. They warn about these dangers of working too much or spending too much time on friends and hobbies. They're very predictable dangers, but the thing is, they're very real and they happen all the time. You would think when we know something is wrong, we shouldn't do it, but has that ever stopped us? When you were a kid growing up and your parents said, don't do that, you're like, that's an invitation to go do that, right? I mean, I didn't even know that was a possibility, so let me go try that. And the same is true in marriage. We're told, hey, these are going to be issues in your marriage, and they still are issues in our marriage. So let's take a look at these challenges and go a little bit deeper into them. The first one's money. Now listen, money in and of itself is not evil. It is just a thing. But how we view money and how we handle money can have a big impact in our lives and in our marriages. Money can divide a marriage when one partner spends without regard to the other. This happens because they're still thinking in the mindset of mine and yours. That's my money. I make it on my job. That's your money. You make it on your job. But in reality, once you're married, the money and the things are now all ours. All of it. Two become one flesh. Everything is included in that. His and her bank accounts. Guys, it's not a good idea. Ours. It's our bank account. It's our money. This is us together. When I spend money, I'm going to talk to you about it. We're going to agree on what we spend money on, what we don't spend money on. Some of you at times will be on a single income. You're going to live on this thing called a budget. They suck. Hey, they work. Okay? There's a reason they're there. If not, we would spend all of our money on fun, and then like when the bills came, we'd be like, oh, what are we going to do about that? I don't know. That's when problems come in. It's about oneness in marriage in all areas of our life. Another area is work. In the modern world, especially with the breakdown of clear boundaries between work time and off time, people are working longer and more than ever before. Thanks to smartphones, we find ourselves working all the time. And y'all know this to be true. It doesn't matter if you're at home. It doesn't matter if you're at dinner with your spouse. It doesn't matter if you're on vacation with your family or if you've been sleeping. That phone goes off, and what do we do? Well, I got to check it. Oh, it's work real quick. It's not work real quick. No. Let me ask you this. If you're on the job and you bring a bunch of personal stuff with you to your job, and that day you're like, hey, I'm going to work on some home stuff. I'm going to make handmade Valentines for my kids tomorrow at work. What's your boss going to do? Oh, that's lovely. Please, do more. No, they're like, hey, I pay you to do a job. I need you to do your job. I have known people who got fired for doing too much personal stuff at work. What I don't know if any boss getting fired because they made me do work on my personal time. This is a fight I had at every place I've ever worked. They're like, oh, your salary, that's 24/7. I said, nope. I said, that salary is based on this 8 to 5. And I work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I'm not working any other time. I had a lot of pushback on that, but that's just the way I hold myself down. I'm not going to do that. When I walk out that door at 5 o'clock, you know what stays at work? Work. When I go home, you know what's my priority? My home. I had a boss one time that made me come and do inventory on a weekend. So I came out on Saturday morning. I did my area of inventory like an hour and a half, and I went to him and was like, okay, I'm ready to go. Well, we got more to do. I was like, no, you told me that's not area. Just on him the entire time. And basically, I looked at him and said, so because someone did, the sad thing about us doing inventory is we had 4 people whose full-time job was inventory. So I was like, so why am I coming in on Saturday to double-check their inventory when their job was inventory? It got kind of intense, but I just kept pushing him. I had things to do that day with my family. So a month from that point, we had to do inventory again. He told everybody to do inventory. He asked me to stay after the meeting. He said, don't you come. I said, okay, I won't. I had no problem. But I try to hold my family time sacred. My boss was telling me you need to stay at work. I said, tell you what I'll do. I won't stay after 5 o'clock at work. If you want to come at 2 or 3 in the morning to see if I showed up to work, I will. Because when I go into work at 6 o'clock in the morning, my family was asleep. So me going in at 5 o'clock didn't affect anything. But that evening, they're expecting Daddy home at a certain time. Guess what? Daddy's coming home. It's a choice that we make. You're like, yo, you don't know my job. Get another job. God says your family is important. God says the second most important relationship to him is your spouse. I have seen too much time work interfere with families. Husband and wife sitting side by side, her doing her job, him doing his job, and just drifting apart. No connection. When you're at home, be at home. Wherever you are, be all there. When you're at work, hey, kill it. Rock it out. Work your tail off. Be the best employee they have. When you're at home, be the best husband. Be the best dad. Be where you are. Don't let it interfere. The third area where we can have these issues is the issue of our friends. Hopefully all of you have friends. If not, I'll be your friend, okay? So just let me know when you're leaving, hey, you're my friend now, okay? But if not, if you have other friends, that's cool. You can use them as friends. I'll just hang out with myself. That's fine. But all of us have friends, and a lot of the times we have friends, there's sometimes like, these are my friends before I got married, these are your friends before we got married, and then sometimes you have those like friends that we have together in marriage, all right? And the thing about friendships is even if they're the married couple friends, there's always like somebody who's like the true friend in the marriage, right? It's like the women hit it off really good. The guys get along great, but it's really the women who are the best of friends in that marriage. Or you might have friends and they have friends and they're separate. And here's the thing, that's going to be the case because you and your wife aren't the same people. You have different tastes, right? You have different views, and so you're going to find people who like to do things you like to do. The thing is, before you go to hang out with your friends, you need to think about what those boundaries look like. Hey, I'm not going to spend the afternoon with my friends. Well, what's the afternoon look like? It's not from 12 on. It's, hey, I'm going to go about 3 hours. I'm going to go from 12 to 3. We're out and do this thing, and then I'm coming home. Set those boundaries up. Because remember, when you're married, you're one flesh, and everything you do with your friends has an impact on your marriage. People are watching you everywhere you go. People see what you do. And whether with your spouse or with your friends. A good rule of thumb, if you're with your friends and, hey, let's do this, and you're like, my wife would never let me do this, don't do it. Okay? I'm just going to throw that out there. If there's something you wouldn't do with your spouse, don't do it with your friends. Because that's not respecting your spouse. That goes back to the thing I said early on. Every choice we make in life affects our marriage. Yeah, that's one of those choices. We have to set boundaries with our friends. It's great to have friends. It's great to spend time with them. It's great to connect. But there's got to be a point where we set up these boundaries. We're always representing this oneness of marriage. So we've talked a lot today looking at this concept of what a Christian understanding of marriage. And it's important that we understand that this is a Christian viewpoint on marriage. If you go out and start sharing this with other people in the world, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. Because they don't understand who God is and what God's purpose is for their lives. But we do. We get this. We get our idea of marriage and what it is from God's word. And what's more, our marriage should bear witness to who Christ is. We see this in Ephesians 5:25 and 27. He says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might being present to the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. See, to marry as a Christian is to enter into a lifetime of dying to ourselves. Spouses cannot put their own desires first. They must serve the other and learn to find their joy in their beloved. Indeed, they must understand that they will succeed and flourish only as much as their spouse is succeeding and flourishing in their lives. We receive glory from glory with our other half. A Christian marriage also testifies about the relationship that we have with Christ, that all blessings of Christ are now through him in our union with him. Galatians 2:20 says, I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. When husbands love their wives as Christ loved the church, and when wives submit to husband as the Lord did, we are beginning to model to the world around us Christ's love. And ultimately, this sort of marriage points to what a great marriage would look like at the end of time, when Jesus comes back for all of us. Revelation 21:2 says, and I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. You see, the reason God gave us marriage is this illustration of our relationship with him, that we are the bride of Christ. And he wants us to understand marriage so that we can have a better relationship with him. So, now that we know this is a Christian marriage we're talking about, we have this understanding of what it looks like, what are some practical steps that we can take to strengthen our marriages? I got 7 steps we're going to run through real quick that will help you in your marriages. The first one's this. Tell your spouse, I love you, and then do it. You see, voicing your feelings of love is great. Telling your spouse, I love you is great. But you know what's better than that? Showing them that you love them. It's an action. It's about how you treat your spouse. It's about what you're doing in that relationship. Paul tells husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. If you want to have some little homework from today's lesson, go home and read 1 Corinthians 13, that love chapter. All of those love words in there are action words. They're things that we can go and do. It spurs us on to be something else, not just to say something else. Bob Goff wrote a book called Love Does, which is an appropriate name because love is something that is an action. But this is what he said. But the kind of love that God created and demonstrated is a costly one because it involves sacrifice and presence. It's a love that operates more like a sign language than being spoken outright. It's a love that requires action and things to do. Another thing we can do is say you're sorry. I use this one a lot. This one is on the tip of my tongue. If there was like a speed dial of things Pete says to Angie, I'm sorry is one on top of that list. I'm by no means perfect. I make mistakes. But the best thing I can do is when I realize with my wife and my kids I've made mistakes is to go to them and say, hey, I messed up. That one's on me. And I'm sorry for that. And then the big kicker, don't do it again. Sorry's good, but sorry and not doing it again, that's what we're really after here, okay? A quick note to the offended party. If your spouse has hurt you and they're saying sorry to you, your job is to forgive them, okay? And forgiving means leaving the wrong in the past where it belongs. If you have trouble doing this, ask God to help you. Sometimes we mess up a little bit, sometimes we mess up a lot. But when they come to us and are repentant, hey, I'm really sorry for that, we have to forgive them. And sometimes that can take time, I get it. But ask God, God, help me to forgive them. God, help me to understand what it means to forgive them as you forgave me. Forgiveness is what allows the relationship to move forward. You would want your spouse to do the same for you when you had to apologize for something. Step 3, sandwich any criticism with praise on both sides of it, okay? If you realize your spouse needs to make a change in some area, don't nag, don't point out, but come to them, have a conversation in private. Don't do it in public. Like, if your spouse is texting in church, they'll be like, hey, you need to stop texting in church right now. Do it in private, okay? Do something easy. But start with, hey, you do this. You're a great provider for our family. You take such great care of the kids, whatever. But I've noticed this is something you're doing, and maybe we could work on that. But then finish it with, but again, I love you very much, and I'm so thankful that we're together, all right? Sandwiches are good. We enjoy sandwiches, okay? So when you have to criticize or constructively encourage your spouse, give them a sandwich, okay? Make sure that you go, hey, here you go. It's a nice, tasty sandwich. You may not like the middle, but hey, it's really good. All right, think about an inverted Oreo. We have cream, cookie, then cream. That's what we want to do here, okay? And some of you are like, just get rid of the cookie, just give me the cream. That's fine. We can do that, okay? We know this to be true, though, because Mary Poppins told us so. Mary Poppins told us that a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, all right? So if you don't believe me, you can trust Mary Poppins, because Julie Andrews never steered anybody wrong. Another step we can take is this. Be thankful for what you got. Appreciate your spouse's good qualities and try to minimize in your mind aspects of your marriage that are not what you would like them to be. Definitely don't compare your marriages to other people's marriages. Don't compare them to movies. Don't compare them to rom-coms. If you watch Hallmark, that's not what a marriage should be, okay? That's not, that's just not it, okay? We can't be in comparison. We need to focus in on our spouse's good qualities. This takes a lot of maturity, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of commitment, but it's something we have to do. Something my dad says when he does marriage counseling, and I've started asking this question, is this. A lot of times we marry people hoping they will change. The question is, when you go to marry that person, for those of you who aren't married, this is for you. Before you say, I do, I'll marry you. If there's something in their life that you hope will change, and you know you can't live with it unless it does change, then the answer is no, I'm not getting married to you. When you say, I do, yes, I will marry you, that means I will take you as you are. And even if you never change or get any better, I'm okay with that. And if you can't say that to that person, you shouldn't marry them. Because that thing, if they don't ever change, is going to drive a massive wedge between the two of you. Okay? Be thankful for what you got. Don't focus on the negative. Focus on the good. Number 5, give of yourself sacrificially. Putting yourself first on a regular basis is a surefire way to damage marriage or, in reality, any relationship whatsoever. Marriage involves sacrifice, lots and lots of sacrifice. If you hate the sacrifice, don't get married, okay? Simple. It's no longer just about us. It's not about us. It's about what we can do for the other person. And here's the thing. If I'm living my life sacrificially, hey, what can I do for my spouse? And they're living their life, hey, what can I do for them? You have this little battle of how we can love each other better. You know what that makes? A really strong marriage. A really, really good marriage. The great reformer Martin Luther put it this way. Let the wife make the husband glad to come home, and let him make her sorry to see him leave. Sounds like a good marriage to me. You love being together, and you hate to see the other one go away. Number 6, do something fun together. God made fun. God loves fun. God wants us to have fun, and He gives us a good gift of His creation to enjoy together. Make time for enjoyable activities with your spouse. Marriage is a journey, and we have to look at it over a long period of time, not just at little snapshot moments of when things were good or things were bad. You have to look at its entirety. So take time to make that journey good. Your feelings over time, they're going to ebb and flow. That's just the way things are. So try to do as much fun as possible. Try to do things together, to grow together, and make them enjoyable things. Create those opportunities to enjoy each other in your relationship. The last step I want to give to strengthen your marriage is this. Repeat above steps as needed. It's like when you shampoo, what does it say on the bottle? Wash and repeat as necessary. Guess what? In marriage, it's necessary. Okay? It's not like we do these 6 things one time where we're good, we got perfect marriage. No, it's a continual process. Do it over and over again. I want to quote Dory. She was very wise. It said, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Okay? You got to put your head down and just keep trying. There's no surefire solution. There's not some magical thing I can tell you today that'll make your marriages perfect. It takes work. It takes sacrifice. It takes love, which is action. It takes a lot to make it happen. And sometimes you just got to put your head down and just keep swimming. Just keep going at it. If you're going through a really, really hard spell, seek help outside your marriage. See a counselor. Talk to a family member. Talk to a trusted friend. We weren't meant to go through life alone. Look around the room. This is a body. This is a church. We're all here for each other. And ultimately, we're here for God. See, marriages need tending just like every other growing thing in life. Make sure you're tending to your marriage. So what would our community look like if Christian marriages were extremely different than other marriages? Most of you probably know this, but there's a very sad statistic that says there's no difference in the divorce rate among Christians as there is non-Christians. That shouldn't be so. 55% of marriages end in a divorce. It doesn't matter if you believe in God or not. Guys, Christian marriages should not end in divorce. We have God on our side. We're not trying to do this in our own strength. We're not trying to love another sinner who makes mistakes and messes up all the time, just like we do, in our own strength. We should be asking God every day, God, help me to be better in my marriage. God, help me to love my spouse more. God, show me ways to love my spouse in ways that they don't see it coming. We should see that number begin to drop if we truly sought after God first. And then our marriages would tell a different story. People would look at the church and be like, that's what I want in my life. And it's not us, it's Him. C.S. Lewis put it this way. When I have learned to love God better than my earthly dearest, I shall love my earthly dearest better than I do now. God first, spouse second, your kids third. After that, I'll let you decide. But those first 3 are non-negotiable in God's eyes. He's number 1. Wife is number 2. Learn to love God first, and then loving everyone else, just a natural outflow of who you are.